take it! This is the greatest thrill of my life! I'm king of the world! Woohoo! Woohoo! Ah! Go! Go! Go!
Whether you're a hardcore gamer or not, you've almost certainly heard about the Cyberpunk 2077 controversy by now. Created by CdProjectRed, the game, which features customizable characters, visceral, realistic graphics, Keanu Reeves, was meant to be the future of immersive gaming. But instead of reaching the stars, the darling of the gaming world, best known for titles like The Witcher, spent nearly 10 years essentially digging their own grave. So what exactly happened, and what will the future of this once glistening game developer be? Stick with us as we explore the rise and fall of CdProjectRed. Before we get into the current controversy, we first need a bit of backstory. Back in the late 80s, in communist-controlled Poland, two high school buddies, Marcin Iwinski and Michael Skizinski, a couple of geeky computer hackers, loved games but had a hard time finding them in their era. They would import games from friends from other countries, or would sell cracked versions of games with their digital thumbprints hacked off, at local underground marketplaces. Eventually, the two decided to go into business for real, and in 1994 started CD Projekt, translating and localizing games for their region. One of their early successes was Ace Ventura. Things began to heat up when the young company partnered with developers PC Port to create a sequel to their marginally successful game Baldur's Gate. But after 6 months, the project was scrapped due to financial reasons. CD Projekt was left with a decision. They still owned the code they had poured months of hard work into creating. So they decided to continue with development, but it would be a project completely their own, and CdProjectRed was born. The initial idea was to adapt a fantasy book series by Andrzej Sapkowski called Wise Men. After a series of tweaks, the game would eventually be released by its English name, a title you may have heard of, The Witcher. The game was an instant hit, spawning several sequels, with The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt being considered by many to be one of the greatest games of all time, even birthing a Netflix series starring pretend Superman and real-life super geek Henry Cavill. Flash forward to 2012, and things start to get real juicy. That year, at CdProjectRed's annual summer conference, Iwinski announced that the team was working on a new AAA RPG, a fully immersive, gritty, futuristic sci-fi adventure game called Cyberpunk 2077. The game was announced with the promise that it would be the future of video games. Of course, at the time, no one knew just how far into the future they would have to wait for the game's release. A year after the announcement, CD Projekt released a short teaser for the game, displaying the jaw-dropping graphics and gritty tone the game promised. Despite this teaser, the game development didn't start in earnest until around 2016, with the initial process taking about 4 years. The game was supposed to come out in April 2020, and a long trailer debuted at E3 2018, fueling the hype. Things reached critical mass when action star and just all-around lovable guy Keanu Reeves announced that his likeness would be used for a major character in the game. Wow, you weren't kidding. I really thought you were kidding about that Keanu Reeves thing. Of course, that April release date came and went. The first delay announcement came in January 2020, with CDPR stating that the release would be pushed back to September. But by September, it became November. The constant delay announcements became so consistent they even sparked memes. And to be fair, they gave themselves a tall order, trying to release games for PC as well as old and new versions of Xbox and PlayStation all at once. Just when it seemed like this game might never see the light of day, finally, after nearly 10 years of anticipation, in December 2020, Cyberpunk 2077 officially released. Not as the massive explosion fans anticipated, but as a big, wet fart. In a matter of days, the game went from being the most anticipated game of all time to a global pariah, sparking fan revolt, turmoil within the company, the massive downturn of CDPR stock, lawsuits, and the list goes on. So what exactly went wrong? To begin with, the game, which built its hype on its incredible graphics and immersive gameplay, was full of more bugs than the Temple of Doom. Some glitches were funny. Others were a bit graphic, accidentally revealing characters' oddly detailed genitalia. But most of it was just infuriating, pulling players out of the immersive nature of the game, sometimes even literally preventing them from completing missions. Oh, but it gets worse. Some game reviewers call the poor frame rate nauseating, although I think a RTX 3090 might have solved that one. But one woman, an editor at Game Informer, even experienced a life-threatening grand mal seizure after playing through a section of the game involving rapidly flashing lights. In trying to push the game out, CdProjectRed bypassed final certifications for various platforms. As a result, the game was able to release without a seizure warning or any other way of turning off the effect. Not surprisingly, all the backlash led to a massive wave of gamers attempting to refund their games. Unfortunately, they would only run into even more headaches. CD Projekt released a somewhat confusing statement on Twitter encouraging customers to seek refunds from retailers, leading people to believe that the company had reached some kind of agreement with these retailers, which, of course, they didn't. So players ran into sticky refund policies of PlayStation and Xbox, who typically don't refund games after they've been downloaded and played. Some players logged in as much as 10 hours of gameplay before running into major issues. PlayStation released a statement that it would honor refund requests for the game, also noting that it would be removing the game from its online stores entirely until further notice. Shortly after, Microsoft released a similar statement, saying that the vast majority of customers who had purchased the game had requested a refund. This backlash, as you might have guessed, led to major problems for the company. Following the game's release, CD Projekt saw a near 30% drop in stock price. The game that was meant to ensure the company's future was beginning to look more and more like its coffin. It's not entirely clear what happened during the development process, but as CD Projekt has fallen under so much scrutiny, more light has to be shed into the way their business operates. During the production of The Witcher 3, it had come to light that CD Projekt was utilizing some business practices that were, shall we say, unpleasant. The industry term is mandatory crunch, which it's basically as it sounds, studios requiring extremely long, intense work hours in order to meet deadlines. To be fair, it's not just CD Projekt who does this type of thing. At this point, it's pretty much an industry-wide problem. Studios like Rockstar reportedly imposed 100-hour work weeks to complete Red Dead Redemption 2. The problem is that after being criticized following The Witcher, Marcin Iwinski said in an interview with Kotaku back in May 2019 that the company would move away from mandatory crunches, stating, "We all are known for treating our gamers with respect, and I actually would like for us to also be known for treating our developers with respect." Now, there is a novel idea. So how did Iwinski plan to make good on this statement? By issuing a non-mandatory 6-day crunch schedule. Because of course, when your boss tells you your company needs you to meet a deadline, but then tells you it's not mandatory, that's always a huge load off your back, right? It's like the 5 pieces of flair. That's a minimum. Of course, by September 2020, in a full demonstration of douchebaggery, the company would pull a complete 180, saying that no matter what, they would not move their November deadline, reinstating mandatory 6-day minimum work weeks. Why? So that the developers could work out all the bugs before releasing the game, which is just utterly ridiculous because 1, the game got pushed back by another month anyway, and 2, when it did finally come out, it was full of bugs and glitches. Since the release of Cyberpunk, over 43 CD Projekt Red employees have spoken out about the brutal work environment. And just when you think that that's the worst of it, it doesn't end there. Another factor in this increasingly complex equation has to do with some unsavory ways which CD Projekt Red misled game reviewers. According to some journalists, when it came time to play the game for review, they were only given codes to the PC version, which by all accounts was exactly the game everyone hoped for. However, these journalists were also given a strict embargo to not include any actual gameplay footage, but only B-roll provided by CD Projekt. To make matters worse, CD Projekt only included gameplay footage from the PC version in all their promotional materials, without so much as a hint that the experience would be vastly different on consoles. These types of shady practices have given investors grounds to file 2 class action lawsuits against CD Projekt for misrepresentation in order to receive financial benefit. So, what does all this mean for the future of CD Projekt Red? Well, that remains to be seen. The developers were apparently working on new patches to fix some of the bugs when, in an incredibly ironic turn of events, the company was hacked, leaving the company employees locked out of their computers. Yeah, it's just a real hot mess, if ever there was a hot mess. The moral of the story, and what most gamers truly want out of developers in the future, is honesty, transparency, and dignity. What we didn't want to see is developers being ridden like mules to push a product out before the project was even complete. Of course, we would love to have our games released when promised, but not at the expense of the game quality and certainly not at the expense of the well-being of the employees. But what do you think? Can CD Projekt redeem itself moving forward? Should companies continue to use things like mandatory crunches to meet deadlines? What roles do gamers play in shaping how companies release their product? Let us know what you think in the comments below. And if you know any other great company stories, both successes and failures, we'd love to hear your ideas.